Looks like we are live now. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Brian Christie. I have the honor and privilege. I've had the honor and privilege to serve as the 2024 president of the Crowdfunding Professional Association, CfPA. And before we turn to our main event, which is Jenny, I'm going to talk a little bit about CfPA, a little bit about what we do. CfPA is the trade association representing the interests of small businesses, investors, and practitioners who are participating in the regulated investment crowdfunding space. If you had to boil down what we do, it really comes down to three things. It's educate, advocate, and advance the industry. Those are the things we're really focused on. We are an all-volunteer board, which means that, in my view, we represent the best in the spirit of crowd collaboration. There are different perspectives on our board represented by the industry, and we have different visions for where the industry could go. But I'd say that what's true is that we're all united as true believers in the power of regulated investment crowdfunding. Now, the board operates with the CfPA operates with a board, with executive officers, with committees. We have membership, and I was invited to join the board at the encouragement of Scott McIntyre, and he is the current chairman. And it's been his leadership that has been the glue that has kept the organization operating for really the past decade. And later, I was invited to join as an executive officer by Scott and by Devin Thorpe. And Devin Thorpe is my predecessor. He's the 2023 president of the association. He's the current treasurer, the CfPA. And I'd like to thank Devin for his commitment, contribution, and encouragement that really created a foundation that we've had the luxury to build upon this year. Now, our board operates with a rotation in the executive officer positions so that the secretary from one year becomes the VP the next year, becomes the president the next year, becomes the chairman, and then the vice chairman. And so it's quite a long rotation, but it's 1 year each. Next year, I will join with Devin as co-chair. So I'm honored that I'll get to share that role with Devin next year. Brian Belay, who's the secretary, will then be VP, supporting Jenny in her efforts as president. Now, there's benefit to this structure in that it provides us with continuity as an organization, and it also helps to avoid burnout from those people who take on the task of having these executive roles, and allows us to really advance this important agenda. Now, our industry and this webinar and our CfPA's programming, it's really been made possible by the generous sponsorship of our sponsors, and I'll go to that list. These include companies and organizations like Dealmaker, Go Fund Yourself, Clearing Bid, Digital Niche Agency, DNA, and Crowdfund Holdings Innovators. So I want to thank all those organizations for supporting our organization and this webinar series. And I'm going to introduce our speaker and give her background. At the end, we'll allot some time for Q&A for Jenny to speak. So with that, I'll turn over and let me give a little bit of background before I hand things over to Jenny. So Jenny Kassan is an accomplished attorney, coach, and ecosystem builder, and she's been dedicated to enhancing capital access for underrepresented entrepreneurs. Jenny has a JD from Yale Law School and a master's degree in city and regional planning from UC Berkeley, and she's the author of Raise Capital on Your Own Terms, How to Fund Your Business Without Selling Your Soul. She has co-founded several ecosystem building organizations, including the Sustainable Economies Law Center, Force for Good Fund, Crowdfund Main Street, Angels of Main Street, and Opportunity Main Street. I detect a common theme here. So through her law firm, the Kassan Group, she provides guidance to social enterprises, investors, and intermediaries. Jenny has also served on the SEC Small Business Advisory Committee. Now, Jenny has been part of the crowdfunding since inception, and many of us think of inception as that time when was passage of the Jobs Act, but actually she's been working on crowdfunding since before that. And it is possible that we would not be here today. I don't just mean in an obvious way because she's speaking. I mean, as individuals, as representatives of an industry, we would not be here today if it weren't for Jenny's really earliest efforts in supporting crowdfunding. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jenny. And Jenny, please, let's hear a little bit about your vision for the future, and please take it away. And you're on mute right now, by the way, so you know.
Yes, I just wanted to get my sharing going. So, yes, thank you so much, Brian. And thank you also to Rose, who's helping to facilitate this today. Um, I'm just so thrilled to be a part of this organization. I've been on many, many boards and worked with many, many nonprofits, and this is really one of the best. It's such a collegial group of people. We have a really large board now of amazing leaders in the industry, and we work really well together. We get a lot done. So thank you so much. I wouldn't agree to be the president of an organization that wasn't as well run and collegial as this one. So thank you so much, Brian, for your leadership. And I'm glad you're going to continue to be involved, of course. So, anyway, thank you for joining today. I'm going to be talking about my vision for 2025 in the regulated investment crowdfunding space. And, Brian already talked about the mission of the organization. I will go ahead and skip that. And I believe we will share these slides for anyone who's interested. Um, we are a 501c6, so we are able to do some lobbying and advocacy work, which is a really important part of what we do. And then this is our succession plan. As Brian mentioned, the way we do our officer positions is through this succession plan, which works really well because if you decide to be a part of the organization and become an officer, you go through the ranks so that by the time you become president, you have some time under your belt doing other things. So next year we will have Brian Belay, or I should say in 2026, we'll have Brian Belay as president. And we are looking for folks to step up as secretary starting in 2025, who will then be on the track to become president after 2 years. So that's a little bit about CfPA. I'm going to share from the heart, the things that I've been thinking about in the world of crowdfunding. I have been in crowdfunding since about 2006. Um, and the CFPA, it's very intentional about what it states publicly. And it's possible that some of the things I say will not necessarily represent what the organization believes. So I just want to make it clear that what I'm sharing today are my personal views. Of course, there's a ton of overlap, but don't take anything I say as a representation of what CFPA is, what our official positions are. So, let's see. So I want to start out by just sharing how I got involved in the space of crowdfunding. So I graduated from law school in 1995, and I went to work for a nonprofit organization in a low-income neighborhood in Oakland. And one of my jobs was to work with the small businesses there. And I just noticed how under-resourced small businesses were. And I was lucky enough to be friends with Michael Schuman, who's been a leader in the space of advocating for small business in our country for many, many decades. And he's written some amazing books like The Small Mart Revolution and Going Local. And he told me that one of the reasons why small businesses struggle so much with having sufficient financial resources is this thing called the securities laws. And I didn't really know anything about the securities laws, even though I had gone to law school. Um, but I started looking into it and I found out that it is true that, there's a lot of hurdles that you need to jump through if you want to raise money from investors. And the way the system is set up, it makes it quite hard to raise money from people who might be your biggest supporters, like your customers. And I also found out that there was a tradition of some businesses, it was not that common, but some businesses had raised money from their communities, from their customers and fans. And so one of the very first examples of that I'm aware of was Ben and Jerry. When they first started out, they were a Vermont-based business, pretty much only selling in Vermont. Um, and they really wanted to grow, and they raised $750,000 by doing what we called back then a direct public offering. And the way they, legally, you're not allowed to offer securities to the public unless you do certain, deal with certain legal hurdles, but they figured out a way to do it. Basically, there's a federal exemption if you're only offering your securities within a single state, and then there's a state level registration process. So they were able to raise $750,000 from their community, and they grew from there. And many of their investors actually made quite a lot of money when they ended up going public. So um, I was really inspired by that story. And, Michael Schumann and I really set out to figure out, how do we grow that? How do we make that more possible? How do we get more businesses to be able to do that? So I ended up leaving the nonprofit I was working at and started a law firm to focus on that work. And I found out that there actually was this thing called a direct public offering. This lawyer named Drew Field had done quite a few of them. Many businesses had done that same process that Ben and Jerry had done. It was actually possible to do it in multiple states. I actually had a client that had done it in 16 different states, but you had to register in each state. So it was a very onerous process. This book came out in 1997. Another really awesome book that came out in 2011 was Loca Vesting by Amy Cortez, The Revolution in Local Investing. And so it's a very well written book that just looked at all of these different examples of how small businesses had used crowdfunding, which we did not call it that back then, but they had used investment crowdfunding to raise money for their businesses. And so, again, I was really inspired by this, but also frustrated because it was so onerous. And in some states, it was easier than others. I'm in California. California made it really difficult. Um, I actually did raise money under California law using a direct public offering. We registered with the state of California for our law firm and ended up raising about $250,000 from our community. So I had done it myself. I had helped many clients do it, but I was frustrated with how challenging it was and how long it took. Um, and so I got together. Well, I had started a nonprofit called Sustainable Economies Law Center with Janelle Orsi. And one of the very first things we did was we decided we were going to advocate to try to change the law. So we ended up raising money on Indiegogo, which was a donation-based crowdfunding platform. We raised the huge sum of $1,321 to fund our efforts to do some lobbying with the Securities and Exchange Commission and federal legislators and president to try to change the law. And so amazingly enough, this was back in 2010. 2 years later, I mean, it's incredible, but 2 years later, there we were at the White House watching the 2012 Jobs Act get signed into law. Um, so that was really great. However, unfortunately, the law was not, it didn't, when the law was first written, it was a really nice, simple law. And of course, over time it changed and became pretty complicated, and there were some things about the law that we were a little disappointed with. But the good news was, all of a sudden, instead of having to do these state by state registration processes, federal crowdfunding was now legal. There was a preemption of state regulation, so now you could do nationwide crowdfunding, and there was no process anymore that where you had to go back and forth with the state, trying to get them to approve your offering. So we were obviously very excited. Um, but I just do want to always mention that so we use the term regulated investment crowdfunding, and when we say that, what we're talking about is any type of crowdfunding that is any type of fundraising that is open to all folks, investors of any level of wealth or income, and can be publicly advertised. And there's many different ways to do that now. Before the 2012 Jobs Act, you had to do these state level offerings under either the interstate exemption or Rule 504. Those were basically what you could do. Then after the 2012 Jobs Act and the rules went into effect in 2016, it added some more options. So Regulation A plus and um, obviously regulation crowdfunding. And actually Reg A existed even before this, but then we got Reg A plus. Before you could only raise up to $5,000 under Reg A, so very few people used it. So I just like to share that history just so people know this isn't such a new thing. It's been going on for a long time. But, when the Jobs Act when regulation crowdfunding went into effect in 2016, it definitely opened up a lot more possibilities and made things a lot easier. But still today, it's been almost 10 years, well, 8 years since regulation crowdfunding went into effect, but we're still seeing a crisis of undercapitalization with the vast majority of businesses in our country. And these are just a few data points. We could point to many more, but if women entrepreneurs had the same access to capital as men, we would create an additional 6 million jobs. New Black-owned businesses start with almost 3 times less capital than new white-owned businesses, and their loan requests are 3 times less likely to be approved. And, venture capital is a tool that many startups want to use, but if you know anything about venture capital, that ecosystem is designed for a very particular type of business that is on a very high growth path to getting very, very large. And 99.9% of businesses it's just not a fit for that model. And I include in that angel investors who are part of that venture capital ecosystem. Bank debt is often not a fit either. Bank debt is generally only available for businesses that already have positive cash flow. And honestly, as someone who has used bank debt for my business in the past, it can be very, very onerous. Often there's a requirement of a personal guarantee. There's a lot of expenses involved with it. Oftentimes, bank debt causes more problems than it solves, I hate to say. Um, and that's any kind of institutional debt, really. And then according to some research, 83% of businesses do not have access to bank loans or venture capital anyway. So there's a huge problem of still, in spite of this law having gone into effect 8 years ago, we still are a long way from it solving these problems. But there is hope, I think, for it being a tool to solve these problems. Um, there's also a growing wealth gap in our country. Um, a lot of I work a lot in the world of finance, not just in regulated investment crowdfunding. My whole law firm is about finance of different types. And so I've learned a lot about the finance industry, and it is amazing to me how much the entire basis of mainstream finance really is extracting wealth and concentrating it in fewer and fewer hands, which is why we are in the position we are today, where wealth has never been so concentrated. Um, and, because of even in spite of crowdfunding becoming legal, regulation crowdfunding, having it now legal to invest in, at the national level and new opportunities being available, most people have limited options to invest in things that they really want to invest in that could grow their wealth other than Wall Street. So of course, regulated investment crowdfunding offers a solution, but we are a long way from it really meeting its full potential to solve these problems. So, what is still missing? So, these are kind of thoughts that I've been having. It's not the most developed thesis, but when I think about what is still missing, I think of three general categories of things. So, one is we still do need some policy improvements, even though we made a huge leap when uh, the Jobs Act was passed. There's still a lot of difficult things about using the exemption. Um, so we need some changes there. And we need to develop the ecosystem. It's still the regulated investment crowdfunding space is still rather small. Very few people are really participating in it, given what the potential is. So how do we make create ecosystems that encourage more participation? And then we also need new business models. I've seen too many businesses that have tried to be successful in the world of regulated investment crowdfunding and not be able to be successful because there's just so many challenges, caused by some of the regulatory issues and some of the dynamics that arise in the industry. So how can we get a little bit more creative about business models that will be successful and, pay a living wage to the people who work in them and also serve the needs of people who want to be part of this new ecosystem? So starting with that first topic of policy change, um, the CfPA has been very active with that. Starting in 2023, we have a policy committee and we started working on developing policy positions. And it took us a while, but it took about a year for us to come up with a list of 18 policy positions that we think would make a really substantial difference in helping more people use these tools more easily. And of course, there's always a balance between investor protection and the ability to have, do capital formation. But, we feel like maybe the balance was struck a little bit too far toward investor protection because, people need to have the right to do with their money what they want to do with reasonable protections from fraud. Um, so we came up with a list of 18 things. We had a longer list, but the board didn't have consensus on every single thing that the committee came up with. But we now have a list of 18 things that we would like to see happen. And we have started working on advocating for those. And, we can share the link to the full list, but it's a few different things. Like number one, as you can see, exemptive relief for small offerings. We think that if you're not raising more than a few $100,000, maybe it should be a little bit easier for you. Um, we want to see some reform of the requirements of the financials that you have to produce to use regulation crowdfunding, the advertising rules, which are very confusing. We'd like to see better consistency and transparency when it comes to how portals are treated because we've seen a lot of inconsistencies there it's very frustrating for the portal operators. We'd also like to see a tax credit for people who invest using regulation crowdfunding. So last October, we went to Washington and had an amazing visit and did a lot of lobbying with legislators and policymakers. And I think we made some really good progress. We made some great relationships. We shared our concerns, and I feel like we got a good reception. And we're not stopping there. We're continuing to meet with, the legislators and the regulators to talk about what happens next. How do we get some of these things to actually happen? Um, and it's a really important time to be doing this work because the people in power right now agree with us on a lot of the things we'd like to see. If you look at Project 2025 and look at the section on securities laws, do I love everything in there? No, but there's certainly some things in there that we actually really would like to see. So, and it turns out that Senator Tim Scott has introduced legislation called Empowering Main Street in America Act, the Empowering Main Street in America Act, which actually include some of the things that we would like to see. For example, an exemption if you're raising up to $500,000, that it would be 100% unregulated, which, I don't think all of our board agrees that that's a good thing, but I think the majority does. So I think it would be a good thing. So we are working on talking to Senator Scott about, to provide input on this legislation. So that's some of the work that we're doing with advocacy, and we're also trying to partner with other groups who share the same interests of changing these laws. And if you join our organization, you can be involved in that. So we we would love to have more members join so you can help us with our lobbying efforts. And we will have another summit where we meet in DC next fall. So that's the first one, is policy change. The next one is ecosystem development. And of course, an ecosystem is a system where all of the different pieces of the puzzle come together to support something healthy happening. And I'm really interested in ecosystems in the world of finance. And how can we make ecosystems that are really healthy to encourage community-based investing? So when I wrote my book came out in 2017, and one of the things I did when I was working on my book is I crunched the numbers, and I found that my estimate is that 99.7% of the investors in our country are what I call non-professional investors. And what I mean by that is anyone other than someone who invests as their profession. So someone who runs a fund, someone who manages money for wealthy folks, even angel investors I included in the category of professional investors because they think about it a lot. So almost everyone who is an investor in our country, and more than 50% of folks in our country are investors, are non-professional investors who really don't think of themselves as investors and don't probably think a lot about where their money is. And of course, almost all their money is in the public markets. And so I'm always thinking about, how do we create ecosystems and tools that make it easier for that 99.7% to move some portion of their portfolio into non-public companies. And there's only about 3,000 companies that are public companies. So 99.999% of companies in our country are not public companies. They're not Wall Street companies. So it's really sad that almost all the capital invested by non-professional investors is invested in only 3,000 companies. So we need to move some of that into all the other businesses in our country. So let's see. Oh, another thing I always like to point out, this is a map that shows the names of different arrangements that happen all over the world where people get together to pool their money to achieve certain goals. And this has been happening for millennia. So it's in our nature to pool resources to make positive things happen in our communities. So we just need to, you know, revive that tradition and make it easier, make it easier for modern folks so we can do it online, and of course have face-to-face in real life, in person communities where we can do it together. So in terms of ecosystem building, one of the really important pieces of that is investor and issuer education. And an issuer is just a company that is raising money using regulation crowdfunding or offering any type of investment offering. And so the CfPA does a lot of education. We have webinars and various other things that we do to try to raise awareness of this ecosystem and how it works and how to invest wisely if you're choosing to do so. So that's a big part of what we're doing. But I think we need to go way beyond in education. I really believe that we need to build hyper-local ecosystems to really grow this space. Because I believe that when we can meet in person around a table and do things together as a community and build trust, that a lot more things can happen. People can change their habits. So if I'm asking somebody to invest in some small business in their community, here, go online and invest in this business. That's kind of a big ask. People aren't super comfortable. They have to put their social security number in. They have to put their wealth and income on the website. So it's difficult to get people to do that. And plus people are just busy. But what if we had physical places where we made it really fun and we brought together the investors and the entrepreneurs. So I'm working on a project in Baltimore that I hope will be a nationwide model where we have a physical gathering space that will be really fun and comfortable, and we'll have drinks and snacks, and we'll host events. So we'll support the entrepreneurs so they know what they need to do it correctly, to, comply with the law, and help coach them on how to like talk to investors, and how to steward your business once you have investors. um, but we'll also bring investors in, which means like everybody. So we'll invite the whole community to come in, learn how to do due diligence together, how to decide what to invest in, have fun, meet some of the issuers and get to know them, because it's way easier to invest in something when you actually meet the founder than just something you see online. And of course, ideally, we will have some dedicated portals. This is challenging because this goes to my third point about business models. The portal business is challenging. So portals that support these types of community-based activities are challenging, but I do think it will be helpful if we can really promote portals that are dedicated to particular communities and to diverse types of businesses in those communities, and not just the ones that are, on the unicorn path. And I also wanted to mention mutual aid. I think that's kind of part of the story. Is mutual aid is something that's, I guess it's been around for a long time, but it really took off during COVID. And this is where, we just really grow the fabric of a community to work together to support each other. And oftentimes that doesn't involve US dollars. It involves ways of people volunteering for each other, making informal trades of services. I'll cook you a meal, you watch my kid while I go run an errand. And I think that's part of what we want to build too. That's the non-dollar economy that can complement the dollar economy, where hopefully we're moving investment dollars into small local businesses. We want to really take advantage of all the resources that are in a community, which obviously is the dollars. I mean, there are a lot of people, even in, lower income cities like Baltimore. There's a lot of dollars there that are invested on Wall Street. Those can, be used locally to support awesome initiatives. And there's also the non-dollar economy of like, let's just grow our community connections and support each other. And I think those things are very complementary. Um, so yeah, this relationships are built at the speed of trust, and change happens at the speed of relationships. So, this is why I decided to buy a building in Baltimore, because I do believe that face-to-face interaction is really important. As much as we've moved so much of what we do online, I would really like to see us bring those face-to-face interactions into this ecosystem that we're trying to build, because I think that will make it easier for more people to get comfortable with community investing. And I don't know if Stephanie Geller is here right now, but I just want to shout out what she has built in Baltimore, which is called the Maryland Neighborhood Exchange, out of her nonprofit Community Wealth Builders. She has really worked hard to build a hyperlocal ecosystem in Baltimore to support crowdfunding. So she works with a lot of small businesses based in Baltimore or near, in Maryland, to help them offer investment opportunities using regulation crowdfunding and other tools, sometimes Kiva. Um, and she helps them find investors. And she has developed a huge list of investors who are interested in local investing. So I just think we need to build on initiatives like that and grow them throughout the country. Okay, so another thing we can be doing is partnerships. So there's many players that we could be partnering with to grow this ecosystem, and I'll name a few. There's probably way more. But one thing I've been exploring is CDFIs. So, that's a community development financial institution, which it could be a bank, it could be a loan fund. There's many different types of CDFIs, but they are certified by the Treasury Department to invest in lower income communities. And I've been speaking to a few different people who are part of the world of CDFIs, and they are very interested in partnering with the crowdfunding community because they see, oftentimes they're unable to make a loan because according to their regulations, there's just not enough safety in the business. There's not enough equity to really justify them making the loan. Well, guess where that equity can come from? It can come from crowdfunding. So I was speaking to a CDFI based in Massachusetts called Leaf. Their website is, I think, leaffund.org. They have actually created an initiative to work with borrowers to help them raise money using crowdfunding to allow them to then borrow money from the CDFI. So that's a really, really promising area that I'm excited to explore more. I've already spoken to a few different leaders in the CDFI space that are interested in working with the CfPA on those partnerships. Philanthropy, I think, could play a big role in this space. Philanthropy is not known for being taking a lot of risks, but I think we need to be convincing players in the world of philanthropy that putting some money into crowdfunding could help them achieve their goals. And I know Honeycomb has some relationships with philanthropy to leverage some of the investments that are made on their platform. And I really would like to see that grow. There's many, many things that philanthropy could do to help our space to grow all these businesses that are struggling. A lot of philanthropists say they would rather um, build financial self-sufficiency and empowerment rather than just having that charity model where it's just give, give, give and never help people, become independent and financially self-sufficient. And crowdfunding would be a great way for them to do that because if we can help small business owners raise some capital on terms that really are, make sense for them and are not extractive, they can really be a lot more successful and stable and you know it can make a huge difference for the owners and their families and their communities. So some of the things I'd love to see philanthropy do more of is matching funds for investments, guarantees for investments. So maybe if the community investors are in a low income community and they're investing money that isn't, they don't have a lot of money, but they're taking that risk to invest some of their money in a crowdfunding campaign. Maybe there could be a guarantee backed by a philanthropist that if the business fails, all of those lower income investors could get their money back. Um, and we really need seed grants for the ecosystem, building work. It's very hard to make money in this space because of all the regulations, and so we need some subsidy. Another movement that I hope we get more involved with is the community wealth building movement. Democracy Collaborative is one of the organizations leading that movement, but I'm hearing that phrase a lot more, the idea that we need to build community wealth. I mean, as I said before, wealth is getting concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. We need to find ways to bring wealth back into disinvested communities, and crowdfunding can be a way to do that. Um, if we can help small businesses raise money from their communities, and there are many cities where maybe there's a lower income core of the city, but there's maybe wealthier folks on the outskirts. What if we could get some of that money that is, from the more prosperous members of the community to invest in local business instead of sending their money out to Wall Street? That could really build wealth. And of course, to the extent lower income folks can afford to invest in campaigns, and if those businesses survive, and if there's a whole set of wraparound services to support those businesses, then we can build wealth for everybody. So I plan to get more involved in the community wealth building movement as president of CfPA. So then the third thing that I was going to mention is that we need new business models in this space. And this is where I don't have a lot of answers. As I've said, I have seen many players in this space really struggle. It is such a highly regulated space, and it's very unpredictable what you're going to need to do to continue to be approved to operate in the space. And so you really need a decent amount of revenue to survive. And the revenue model is really challenging if you're a portal. The amount that you can take from, from the successful campaigns is rather small. And if you're working small businesses that are maybe only raising 100,000 or 200,000, you're really not making enough money to have a viable business. And that's why many of the more successful platforms are targeting the bigger kind of wannabe unicorns that are raising 5 million, which is great. We want those businesses to be successful, but it's really disappointing to me that the businesses that I was most excited about helping when I worked to get the law passed in the first place are really challenging to help because you just cannot make a living when you're taking, 7% of 100,000 and you only have a few campaigns. And it takes time. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs to raise money under regulation crowdfunding. It takes a lot of time and handholding for them to get ready to do it. So it's a very expensive, labor intensive process, and the amount of money you can make doing it is very small. So we need to get creative. We need to ideally bring in some philanthropy and, nonprofit models. So I look forward to hearing others' ideas about how to kind of save this industry, because I'm seeing an industry that is really getting more and more focused on the large raises and kind of leaving behind the ones that need this the most, to be, in my opinion. Um, let's see. I think that was about it. I was just going to say, please join us. It's such a wonderful organization. This is us at our summit in Washington. And there's many ways to get involved. We have a free crowdfunding ecosystem that you can join where you can share a lot of knowledge and ask questions. You can become a member. It's only $10 a month. If you want, you can become a sponsor where you can get some recognition for your business. Oops. And also, one of my goals this coming year, will be to do a lot of listening to players in the industry so we can really understand all the challenges and successes that are happening. So please email me at jkassan@cfpa.org if you'd like to share feedback about your experience in the industry. Thank you.
So Jenny, we have some questions, and so uh, people, I think, are curious about the Capitol Hill lobbying strategy, the timeline, things that will happen, whether or not the organization has identified some likely champions that could advance our agenda. You were really the head of the policy committee for the past year, so you were the one who was, among the team forging consensus around those issues that we've selected. But now it seems like we're moving more toward execution on those ideas. So do you want to talk a little bit about that sort of execution strategy and the organization?
Yes. So our policy committee has broken up into subcommittees to focus on a few of the different areas. For the legislative side, we're working on setting up meetings with the key legislators, and we are also looking for other organizations to join forces with that share the same goals. Um, Obviously, we're more powerful if we can say we're representing a coalition, so there's some work happening with that. And then in terms of meeting with the SEC, it'll be, there's going to be big changes at the SEC. But the good news is, thanks to Brian, we have some great relationships at the SEC with some of the commissioners. So we'll be continuing those, even some of the ones that are staying. And they've been very receptive to what we're talking about. In fact, Commissioner Peirce did come to our summit and was incredibly receptive to what we were asking about. And then, of course, on the tax side, we have a whole separate committee focusing on the tax credit. We got a really good reception on that when we went to Capitol Hill, so we're pushing for that as well. Yeah, so it's a really good time. a really good thing about the upcoming administration and what's happened, the fact that Republicans are controlling the entire Congress and presidency is that they're very open to these things. So we need to strike while the iron is hot, and we are doing that. So we did decide to limit participation in our policy committee activities to members of the organization. So I hope you will consider joining so you can get involved.
Mhm. And in terms of the things that are on the agenda now, does CFPA anticipate adding more, revising things, or is it more on execution? Like, where do you think the balance is going to be?
I think
Since
we will focus on, it took us over a year to come to consensus on the list of 18 things, and it's ambitious. So I think we'll stick with that for a while. Every now and then we'll make a small tweak because we'll realize that it might make sense to make a slight change to what we're asking for, but I think we'll stick to those for a while.
okay. And you mentioned another summit for the year ahead as well, correct? And um, okay. And then of those sort of groups that the organization's engaging with, it sounds like the SEC, FINRA, and legislative bodies, those are all sort of the who the CFPA is sort of having contact with in terms of and so um, any other activities in the year ahead that you encourage people to sort of get involved with?
I mean, I think it's just I get, join the organization, come to our meetings, join one of our committees. It is a really exciting time. It's a wonderful board, wonderful committee members. People are really active. So yeah, I think it's the place to be right now.
Right. I would echo that and and appreciate you taking the baton for this important really, I think from my own perspective, it's going to be a transformative year and for crowdfunding and so exciting time to be involved. So we don't have any other pending questions. If anyone wants to post, this is the last call, last chance to get something in. Otherwise, Jenny, we just want to thank you for all your leadership that you've done, both at an industry level throughout the years. Again, we probably wouldn't be here as an industry if very possibly wouldn't be here if it weren't for your early efforts and ongoing efforts. And really look forward to seeing the direction you take things in the year ahead. So again, thank you. And with that, I will close out the session for today. Again, thank our sponsors for their participation. Jenny, any last thoughts you want to have for?
Yeah, I just want to put oh, it looks like Benji put the link to join. This is a different link. I don't know which is the correct one. But yeah, take a moment to join right now. It's only $10 a month. We really want to grow our movement, grow our credibility. We're going to be lobbying, and if we can't say we have a huge membership, we won't be as credible. So
And
please
bef-
join right
before,
now before you
yeah,
forget.
before we hang up, you actually have another question, Jenny, if you don't mind taking it. So, question comes up: how do you see CFPA working with the investment management community in the coming years?
Investment management. I don't know exactly what you mean by that. If you mean like registered investment
I
advisors
believe,
or,
yeah,
yeah.
the RII
Well,
world
I
is the
mean, I
clarification.
don't know if that question came from one of the best registered investment advisors in the country named Angela Barbash.
Yes, you did. So,
I mean, it's frustrating because I mean, we could have a whole webinar on the frustrations of the financial industry and how hard it is for people who really want to invest outside of Wall Street and in initiatives in their own community, small businesses, startups. How hard it is, especially if you're using an RIA, because most registered investment advisors won't help you do that. They can't make any money if you do that. Luckily, there are a few that have figured out a way to make it happen and make it work. And Angela Barbash is one of them. Her business is called Revalue. It's incredible. I know of a couple others that also help their clients look at these kinds of investments, but you really need to find we really need to lift up those few RIAs that are willing to think outside the box and come up with creative models. In fact, it fits with my third. I didn't make that point in my third point about new business models, but that's a big part of it, is helping grow that RIA industry with, and support those who are more creative and helping their clients do these kinds of investments.
Yeah, we're getting comments that people like to see us working with the business and service models that are working with that community and entrepreneurs as well. So, well, again, thank you everyone who joined. We appreciate your engagement with CfPA. Jenny, thank you for your leadership and for taking the baton in the year ahead. You're going to have a lot on your shoulders in this particular year that's coming up. So, but hopefully the rest of us can be supportive to helping move the agenda of the organization forward. So, thank you everyone. With that, we'll close it out and see you at the next time. Bye for everyone.